This week on the Futurists, Harry Glorikian.
This is unlike any other shift we've had before. I mean, for me, this is the mother of all shifts, right? Because there is a potential for lock-in, like none we've ever had. And it's not the data, it's what the model learns about how you do what you do.
Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tercek, and this week I am solo. My partner, Brett King, is en route to yet another foreign destination, as he tends to do. In the meantime, I've been thrashing through this topic of job displacement, and frankly going back and forth. At first, I thought it was overblown. We've seen reports over the past 10 years that AI is going to displace a number of jobs, up to 50% of jobs, of all jobs. But on the other hand, automation always destroys jobs, and new jobs are always created. So I've been wondering how much and how serious this might be and how sudden it will happen. And a lot of it hinges on how fast it occurs, as there is no doubt certain jobs are going to get replaced over time. To help me understand this question and many related topics that pertain to the way we use software today and how software is evolving and how agents are going to start to not just change the software that we purchase, but change the way that we work, I've invited someone to join me on the show who I was just acquainted with. His name is Harry Glorikian, and he is the author of a forthcoming book called The Invisible Interface. So, Harry, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Rob, for having me. Great to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you because many of the things you're writing about are things I've been wondering about. And so as we got acquainted, I started to look at your blog. And folks, I recommend this. If you're interested in enterprise software, healthcare software in particular, or broadly interested in the topic of agents and how agents are likely to change the way we work and the way companies are organized, then I strongly recommend you check out Harry Glorikian's blog on his website. He's got a lot of other material and resources there as well. But he exposes his thought process in a way that I find very constructive. And he's very candid about it. He's like, I'm just thinking through this problem today, and here's what I'm thinking today. So it's more like a diary, or kind of like an old school weblog kind of, but I like that very kindly. I liked it very much because for a person like me who's interested in to get to know how you think, in just a few minutes, I was able to go, okay, I understand this. I understand where you're coming from. Harry, tell people what you do. Tell me how you work and how what you do shapes the future.
So, well, I mean, I've luckily, and I'm not going to say it was, organized, but throughout my career, I was always somehow at the bleeding edge of some shift by accident, especially when you first start your career, you have no control over that. And then I was deep in healthcare in the, human genome sequencing and other areas. And then I started a strategy consulting firm and got deep into setting strategy and helping companies sort of figure out where they were going to go. And that constantly meant you were on the bleeding edge of what was going to happen next. And at some point, I shifted more into data and how the data was going to shift what was happening in healthcare. Mm-hmm. And I was technical from when I was a kid. We were building PCs and selling them to people while we were in college. We didn't become Dell, but we tried to be on the bleeding edge there. And then, at some point when I saw GPT 2.5, I had my, oh my God moment when I realized the number of technical people I would need around me to have the system do so much more for me was there. I mean, this thing was finally fulfilling the dream of what we wanted.
That's quite
right?
early. GPT 2.5, candidly, barely worked. I mean, it was more like performance art in some regards. That's pretty visionary, I have to say, because I was working with it as well, but we were using it more as like a banana peel for radio like plays. We would use it to generate a script because it was so funny. It wasn't quite able to articulate a whole sentence or a whole concept consistently. Until GPT-3, I thought the output was inconsistent. So that's quite visionary. Like you saw it and you could understand where it was heading and you could see the progress and you anticipated the next few releases.
Well, I also I started making phone calls. Like, it's like the military, right? You want to validate, right, before you go and do something. And I started making phone calls into some people who were getting access to some of these things in ways that the rest of us might not have been. And they're like, oh, you haven't seen anything yet, right?
Oh, I
Wait till
see
you
what you
see
mean.
the right.
So like the public-facing version. It's a little bit like today. If you're using the free version of ChatGPT, you're not really getting the experience. You're getting a degraded experience because they want you to upgrade to the paid version. And so I think a lot of people who are forming negative opinions about AI today are getting that from the free versions. Like they're not really seeing the full potential. So in a way, that problem persists, right? There's a group of people who can see the future and a group of people that doesn't see it. It's opaque to them.
Yes, agreed. And then once I saw that, I was like, okay, this is so cool. And then, the next version hit, and I was like, wait a minute, this is moving
Yes.
this is fast.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I've been reading about it, playing with it. I started, attending a few deep, more technical classes that a few from my friends were putting on, making sure I didn't miss any of them because I wanted to understand how to do certain things. And then as I was reading, I was just seeing, this thing is not slowing down. I mean, I know what the popular press says, but if you read the research and the literature, I'm not seeing a slowdown.
Oh, no.
The
On the
bottleneck
contrary.
moves, right?
Yeah.
God, I'd love Blackwell chips instead of, H100s. Okay, yes, but it's not slowing down. It's just speeding up. And then at one point I was like, this thing is really good at predicting the next word, sort of predicting the next pixel, like knowing how to shape. And by going back and forth with it, I can sort of have an interaction with it like I couldn't with a lot of other systems. And then all of a sudden they turned on tool use. And I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
They just gave the brains like arms.
Yeah.
And now it can actually like reach out there and start to do stuff.
It can do things that instead of saying things, it can now do things. Also, the ability to search the web, big change, right? That was a major shift that I noticed as well. Like suddenly it's like, oh, it can find things and bring them back, and validate things. Those are all, and honestly, that surface is broadening, right? The ability of the ability for it to, the ability to write your own skills now, right? So you can start to train it, train it to build its own tools. Harry, one of the things you mentioned a moment ago, I wanted to circle back to for the benefit of our audience. So you talked a little bit about being in the healthcare business and the shift to data and how your personal career shifted in that direction. But that's no coincidence, right? Because this is one of the big stories that isn't told too often outside of the healthcare industry, which is that all of biology is now a data science, right? That's a big shift. When I was a high school student, biology was a wet science. You wore a lab coat and you had beakers that were bubbling away and so forth. And now it's all computers, right? So computational biology has become a discipline. It's a very substantial and mature discipline. But that change has rippled all the way through the healthcare industry, which is now a data-driven industry, very much so. Down to like the interaction with the patient is something that's recorded and tracked, and outcomes are recorded and tracked. Best practices are now in a way kind of offered to doctors and to practitioners. But in addition, biology itself has changed into a computational science. We've now interviewed several people on the show who are synthetic biologists. And so just like all other data science, the first part is, can we read the data? And the next question is, can we write the data? And now can we compose the data? And that's kind of the trajectory. This is a radical shift. And if you consider biology represents about 40% of the economy, not just healthcare, which is growing to be about 20% of the economy, but also, energy. Most of it comes from biology, still our fossil fuels, food, which is a gigantic chunk of the economy. Maybe this is closer to half of the economy. So that idea to be able to reprogram natural processes, giving agency to humans. And of course, the next stage, I would imagine, is agentic biology. And if you can speculate a little bit about the impact of agents on healthcare, I'd be curious to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you for me, the big turning point was the Reinvestment and Recovery Act, was when the government said to, the healthcare system, those file folders you have in your office, like you got to put that on an electronic medical record, which frankly, Rob, is like such a stupid name for a system, because it's not it's not a health record. It was designed from the ground up as a billing system. They just put a cute name on it, and everybody misunderstood. Which is why it doesn't work so well, right?
Yeah.
Which is why it's so burdensome for the physician. It was never designed from the ground up to manage a patient.
Like a decision facilitation tool of some sort, or an extension of the diagnostic process. Like those would have been really artful ways to approach it. They didn't approach it that way. It's about tracking codes, tracking billing
and
codes.
And if you were rewriting it today, it would be a complete rewrite, right?
Well, but one of your main points in your writing is that with the advent of agents, we don't necessarily need to write the software ourselves. The agents can actually do that themselves as long as they have access to the data, right? And this is a big point in your writing. I think it's not limited to the healthcare industry, which is that most of the vertical software that we have, most of the enterprise grade SaaS tools that are out there, they're vulnerable because they consist of an interface and a database. And in the past, controlling that database meant that you were deeply wedged into that company's operations, and it was going to be very painful for them to extract you and replace you with another vendor. So there was a certain amount of control. Once a company had settled on a system like Epic, for instance, talking about healthcare billing, but it could also be Salesforce, or it could be any number of companies, SAP. But really, that's an interface that's connected to a database, and the interface is optimized for that particular business. So they really understand how people need to use it, or maybe they don't understand it so well, but they've kind of the workforce has been trained to deal with that particular interface, and there's groove in and lock in, and that felt a lot like you had a lock on that company. As long as they kept hiring more people and buying more seats, your business as a SaaS vendor would grow. And then at the beginning of this year, that all changed. Tell me a little bit about that SaaS apocalypse that occurred. February, the beginning of February is where it really clobbered a lot of companies.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, right, and you're right to be skeptical. I think you had said to me, you think they're moving towards lock-in when we were talking a little bit earlier, but for 20 years, the SaaS companies have sort of tried to bundle together this 3-layer piece, right? Which is the record layer, right? Where the truth sits, the interaction layer where, the human logs in and does the work. And then there's the memory layer, which is sort of context that accumulates over time, right? And whether you were Salesforce or SAP or ServiceNow or whatever, they sold you all these things in one bundle, right? The bundle is now coming apart. And
that's interesting. Okay.
The question is, which layer captures the margin going forward? And it's interesting because the SaaS vendors are moving up to defend, right?
Yep.
Their data mode is intact, right? But the seat revenue is at risk, because if my agent can do the work of 10 people, I don't need 10 seats, right? So they have to start to rethink this. So now they're pivoting and saying, well, we want to be in that layer above it. Like I want to, I don't know, what is it? Agent Forces. Yeah. They've got Agent Force. Then what is it? SAP has something called Joule. ServiceNow
has their version. Everybody's trying to introduce that thing to an observability layer or a governance layer of some sort on top of the AI. So let's back up here for the folks who are not so inside baseball, a little bit outside of this. So what we're talking about here are the software as a service companies. These companies grew to gigantic scale, and typically they focused on a particular industry vertical or an industry sector and grew from there. But the way they grew was by selling seat licenses. So as long as your company was hiring more people, you were buying more software, their business was going to grow. But what Harry just pointed out, and he explains very eloquently in his blog posts, is with the advent of agents, with the workforce that's changing from purely human to human plus agent, or sometimes just agent, you just don't need to buy that many seat licenses. So that growth engine has come to a screeching halt, right? It's pretty clear. And actually now what Wall Street's telling us, investors are telling us, is that they see the terminal value of these SaaS companies at zero. Like they are just now already anticipating that at some point you will not need to buy these SaaS products at all. I'm a little skeptical on that note, right? That's the part where I'm like, wait, hang on. These are big established companies with a lot of customers. But the long-term trajectory, I think it does make a great deal of sense. So in reaction, what Harry just said is that the companies like Salesforce that offers a product called Agentforce, SAP has a thing called Joule, and a number of other big SaaS vendors have decided to upgrade or kind of claw their way to another level, which is the governance layer that spans over AI. So their feeling is, okay, if we can't just have tools for humans, we're going to build another layer here that will control. Now, Harry, this smells a lot like lock-in to me. My feeling is that if your company most big companies have a mandate to deploy AI, and most big companies, in a moment of candor, will tell you that they haven't been very successful in that deployment. And a big part of that is that managers don't know what to do with it, and employees don't know what to do with it. So no one's telling people what to do with the AI. So, they haven't set clear goals. But the other big issue is that they haven't got a governance standard. And to do that as a company, you have to do a lot of work. Like you have to really think through, like, what do we stand for? What are our values? What is this company really about? And these are largely questions about business process that are going to be answered by people in either operations or possibly HR. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for HR to redefine itself here, because ultimately we're talking about all the work that needs to be done and the decision of whether to allocate that work to humans, agents, or some combination. That's an HR decision. That's not an IT decision. I'm not sure HR is equipped to make that decision in an informed way right now. So there's a learning curve. But as a result, the AI deployments in big companies have not gone swimmingly. Many of them have been considered a failure. And that's not to write off the whole sector. That's just typically what happens when new software is introduced. In that vacuum, that creates an opportunity for the existing vendors to upgrade their customers on a new platform that, according to the sales literature, is going to resolve all those issues and make it really easy and sort of solve the governance and accountability issues and so forth. Now, this is where I get really skeptical, because I'm like, I don't think those companies share the values of their customers. They certainly didn't design the software with that company's values in mind, right? So this is something that the companies themselves need to really think carefully about. They can't just mindlessly accept the product that's being sent to them by a vendor. But tell me what your perspective is on that. How do you respond when I say that?
No, I mean, I agree. And I mean, this is exactly why well, there are multiple reasons I wrote the book, but this is one of them, is trying to get management to understand where this is going and the implications of this, because this is unlike any other shift we've had before. I mean, for me, this is the mother of all shifts, right? Because there is a potential for lock-in, like none we've ever had. And it's not the data, it's what the model learns about how you do what you do.
Yeah.
And that is a whole other thing. And I think the people that really need to be involved are the people doing the work. Nobody knows that function or that task better than the people doing it. So when I see a CEO hand it over to IT, I'm like, oh my God, I mean, no offense to the IT guys, but that's where you send these projects to die.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Listen, it's not a reflection on IT, and anyway, it's not a value judgment or criticism. It's not their job. It's not their expertise. And, arguably, if it's about work process or, getting workforce tasked properly, that's going to be an HR thing. And here, they don't have the understanding of the technology. So there's a gap there as well. It's an interesting problem, right? Because this decision could easily fall through the cracks between IT, operations, finance, and HR in a big company. And I suspect that's actually happening in some places. Somebody needs to own it and frankly wrestle it to the ground, right? Someone needs to own the problem and wrestle it to the ground. And the problem you're describing is exactly how I see it. I mean, this is like super close alignment here. It is when you're working with an AI, you're very thoughtfully and carefully describing exactly how you work, right? You're exposing your process to a machine that's paying close attention, and words matter, right? The sequence of the words matter. So you're really having to be thoughtful about how you do it. And if you get it wrong, you rewrite the prompt, you try it a few different ways. And over time, you kind of cultivate an understanding, or at least you're getting some kind of result. All of that information is somebody describing their job in minute detail. And, recently I had an opportunity to speak to the folks who are the heads of HR for a number of companies. I was invited to a private event where there were 100 chief HR officers from some large companies in the United States, like Fortune 500 companies. And I asked them about how their AI deployment was going. And they agreed, they have a mandate, but it hasn't been going super successfully. And then I asked them how involved HR is in that. And most of them were not directly involved in the decision or the purchase decision or the deployment decision or anything else. So they were kind of on the periphery. They were aware of it, but they weren't driving it. And I said, but you do understand that what these employees are doing is describing their jobs in minute detail. In other words, that's HR data that you should be capturing and collecting because you're going to get the best possible picture with the most minute level of detail about how the company actually does what it does. The employees are telling you themselves. This is stuff they would never tell you if you asked them, right? But if you put them in front of an AI, they'll basically do a confession here on exactly what their work process is. Right now, that data goes right out the door, or it gets recorded by Claude. And no surprise, 85% of the revenue in enterprise AI right now is being captured by two companies, OpenAI and Anthropic. I suspect that 85% of the data is also being captured by those companies, whether or not they admit it. And that is a strategic risk. When you talk about lock-in, that's the problem for the big companies that are hiring outside platforms to manage and govern the AI deployments for them, is that they're going to lose control. They're going to drive a wedge of proprietary software between them and their workforce and the way work gets done.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the other side because the SaaS companies are trying to protect what they have and trying to rejigger, like moving from a per seat to consumption-based pricing, right? But the model companies aren't sitting still either.
No. Yeah,
right? They're climbing the same staircase, but just from the other direction. They're not going to sit there and just sell tokens, right? Because the margins of the model compress every 6 months. Now, we can have a discussion later about how much compute is available and we're running out of compute. I think that's a temporary constraint, although it's causing some issues.
It's an infrastructure question. It's going to get answered. But your point is really important. It's worth dwelling on. There's $60 billion now of revenue, of enterprise revenue for AI. 55 billion of it is captured by two companies. And that's not ServiceNow, and that's not SAP, and that's not Salesforce, right? These companies are not the ones who are capturing that revenue. And that is revenue that's being diverted away from those companies. That's why Wall Street has issued its verdict on the future of the SaaS companies. The race right now is whether the AI labs, the big AI labs, can claw their way up into the value-added stack and offer services. If they can do that faster than these old SaaS companies can pivot towards AI governance. I would bet on the labs because they've got nothing to lose.
Yeah, but because it's so interesting, right? They're not these existing entities. What model are they using? Because they're not, they haven't built their own LLM.
They don't have,
right?
Yeah, they're building a layer on top of somebody else's model.
Correct. And who's improving the memory? And it's the LLM players, right? So the dynamic of the market is like changing, and I always reserve the right to make minor adjustments because the space is changing so fast that I tell people, you could try something one week and then it doesn't work, and you try it the next week and there was an update, and magically, like what didn't work last week works today.
Yeah.
But when you think about this concept so I call it cognitive rent, which is if you own the memory, you own the customer. If you rent the memory, you're renting the future. It's not a metaphor. It's like which asset is at stake.
Okay, you've mentioned this already on the show, and often in your writing, you talk about the system of record, the system of interaction, and the system of memory. Can you unpack that for our audience before we go to a break? Because I think this is a pretty fundamental concept in your thinking.
Yeah, so if you think about the three pieces that really make this all come together, like I said, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but like the inferencing or being able to make sense out of what you're asking it to do. Pick that next word, right? Some of that is from the training, but then once a model is trained, it's like it's inferencing, it's doing the math to figure out like what's next. That's one piece. The next piece is like, okay, but every time I turn it off, what's that movie with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore where every day he's got to, somehow get her to fall in love with him again because she has memory loss, right? The original systems were like that.
I think the name of that movie was 50 First Dates.
So you'd have to come up with a prompt to say, hi, I'm Harry. This is what I do, blah, blah, blah. So like you wouldn't be starting from scratch every time. Well, now, persistent memory has gotten a little bit better. I think where the research is going with better forms of memory and not just what to remember, but what to forget, that's such whoever wins that battle, I think really, really like has an unfair advantage in the market. Okay. And then finally, and I didn't call it this before, but the harness, something that's wrapped around it that says, I can do this, or I can reach into that tool and bring it to bear on this, and so on and so forth. And the harnesses have gotten, I will tell you, when OpenClaw dropped in January, I was having a heart palpitation because I called the publisher. I'm like, we need to get this book out faster. But and I have my OpenClaw sitting on the desk right behind me, sitting there, right? Because, if you're not building it and you're not playing with it and you're not pushing it, I don't know how you could possibly wrap your head around what it can really do. And these three things together is what I call the personal operating layer. It's that layer.
What three things?
Between the inferencing, the memory, and the harness.
Okay.
And so if you think about this layer, it's the layer between intent and the action. So if people want something to happen, right? And the personal operating layer is, and if I put it into words, not memory, but say it remembers you, it reasons across your context, right? And it acts across your systems, right? And when that happens, your intent is put into action. And when you think about the implications of that for a business, I don't know if people are thinking about it through that lens. If Rob, your agent, was gonna go buy something, and you say, listen, this is what I want you to do. And it goes out, comes back and says, Rob, I found you, I don't know, I use paper towels as a very simple example, right? I found your paper towels. They're recycled. They're made in the United States. The price point is just right. They can deliver it to you on time, blah, blah, blah. And, the first time you may look, it may give you 2 or 3 choices just to be polite, or it's programmed that way. And you'll probably pick the first one because that's what most humans do. And the second time, I don't know, are you going to check it again? And then the third time, you're probably not going to check it again. And so if you're second, you might as well not exist. Now, where have we seen that competitive environment before? That's just not how it works.
We saw it with Amazon Alexa when they were doing voice-driven shopping. If you asked for batteries, like if you were searching on the browser and you looked for batteries on Amazon, you would get hundreds of thousands of different offers for batteries. But if you used Alexa to shop for batteries, you got one result, which was Amazon's own private label version of batteries. Listen, on that note, let's take a break here. We're going to take a pause for a second to get a sponsor message. Folks, you're listening to The Futurists. I'm Rob Tercek, and my guest this week is Harry Glorikian. We're having a lively conversation about agents and the impact on the enterprise. We'll be back in just a minute. Hang tight. Hey there, welcome back to The Futurist. I'm Rob Tercek, and this week I'm talking to Harry Glorikian, the author of a forthcoming book called The Invisible Interface. Harry, tell me about the book. First of all, when's the book coming out? Because I know it's coming soon.
June 30th, and people can start ordering it now.
Oh, and that matters. And pre-orders matter tremendously. So, folks, if you're listening and you find this useful and you want to navigate this crazy world of agents in the enterprise, I recommend you do that. Do Harry a favor. We love to support our authors here, so pre-orders really do make a difference. When you say the invisible interface, I think a lot of people might imagine something different than what the book is about. Can you tell me what's the invisible interface? Because we've gone through the disappearance of a lot of different things ever since the advent of the smartphone. We've been replacing a lot of physical things with software. That's been a big focus of my work. But now you're saying that the interface itself disappears. What does that mean?
So the short version is this new layer is starting to form between people and the software that they use. And I mentioned it earlier, but I call it the personal operating layer because it remembers you, it reasons across context, and it acts across your systems. And the book sort of maps to that exactly. And it's mainly written for three audiences, right? The people running companies, the managers within companies, and even the workers, so that they sort of understand like what's happening. But it's built to help them make decisions. It's not a technical book, to be clear, right? It's written so that people sort of understand where the ship is going. And then once you understand the ship is going, it makes more sense of, you really want to start to pay attention a little bit more deeply.
Cool. Now, when you say the invisible interface, one of the points you make is that the interface is moving from clicks to conversation. And I think that's a profoundly important point. I know it's in the very beginning, like it's like, in the first third page or the fourth page of the book, but I read that and I was like, hang on, that's a really important point because we're missing that. We've had conversational robots. I mentioned Alexa just a few moments ago on the show. They have been underwhelming. In particular, I'm thinking about Siri on the iPhone, and that's been a big disappointment, right? Siri is mildly retarded. It's not really like a effective tool for anything except what's the weather, or can you set a reminder or a timer or something like that. What we really want is an assistant where you can say, hey, can you get this done for me? And, go ahead and book it. If you find the right reservation, go ahead and book it for me. We haven't gotten there yet. Is that what you mean by we're going from clicks to conversation?
Yes. And, if you think about every shift, you and I are, I think, old enough to remember command lines. And then we went to graphical desktops. And I remember when I got my first Mac, I was super excited, right? And then it went to the web and then to mobile and then the feed, right? And every time we did that, it sort of rewrote who won and who lost. And, this shift is, I guess I should say the previous shifts made the human a better operator of the machine, right? And each time the friction just moved around, but you were still driving. And this one actually inverts that dynamic. The machine adapts to you. You stop operating the software, you start delegating the outcome, and the interface disappears.
So that act of delegation is the big shift here. I'm not the one doing the work. I might be the one directing the work. I might be the one setting the goals and determining whether or not the work meets the goals or satisfies me. But the actual work is being delegated. So that's kind of like a split in agency, right? So you have workers, and typically in a company, you want to delegate as much as you can to those workers so that they're free to do it. But companies have all kinds of constraints around their workforce because they can't just do anything. So you already have this kind of governance system in an existing company with human employees. When we put agents into the mix, that changes. Tell me a little bit about how profoundly that changes.
Well, if you think about it, like you and I have always been the glue. Yes, the spreadsheet is there, but I take the data, I put it in there, I work with it, right? I'm the glue that moves everything around. Now, even today, my agents, every morning, go check my email, go tell me which ones I should reply to, put them in rank order, tell me which stuff I should unsubscribe to. But, if I want to, write me a draft. Oh, by the way, I really don't want to set meetings, before 10 a.m. in the morning. And so when it makes the draft, it never suggests a meeting before 10. I'm like 5 times more productive because I am not doing the work.
Yeah,
It's doing the work
just the
for
constant
me.
interruption of stuff coming in your inbox and pings and notifications and the messages and Slack. It's a constant distraction. It breaks you from your concentration. Okay, so one of the things when you talk about the glue, this brings to mind another concept that you introduced in your blog, which is about dimensionality of jobs. And there are jobs that are one-dimensional, and there are jobs that have multiple dimensions. And the definition there that the economists who coined the term, what they're trying to describe there is that some people are multitaskers. And so when you talk about a person being the glue, a person with a multi-dimensional job, a job with a lot of dimensionality, is a person that does a lot of different tasks, and the continuity is on them, right? They have to remember from task to task to task what the ultimate goal is or what they're working towards. And it seems to me that, certain types of knowledge work, the further you go up the management chain, the more multitasking you're likely to do. And so then you have a more multidimensional job, or you have more dimensionality in the job. Now, your view is that jobs with less dimensionality are the ones that are most likely to be replaced by agents in the near term.
Yes, 100%. And I'll tell you why I went down this road is because these AI exposure indexes that say somebody's job is exposed to AI, and those drive me nuts, right? Because they're useless, right?
Me too. They're
and
confusing,
so I
and
said,
they're always misreported by the press.
Correct. So let's take two workers just to make it concrete for someone, right? You got a management consultant. They do, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, 8 things in their job, right? Research, slides, strategy, client communication, implement, right? Theoretically, AI can touch all of them, right? But then let me give you a long haul truck driver, right? Mm-hmm. That person roughly does one thing, right? Move the truck safely from point A to point B. Now, by any exposure index, the consultant is at high risk and the truck driver is at low risk, right? Which one loses their job first? I mean, it's the driver. It's not even close, right? The consultant, AI can absorb some of the tasks, but that person then reallocates to what's left and, frankly, gets more valuable, right? And this is not just me. Like this, I sort of made this easy for management to use. I put it into a simple rubric, but this is based on the work out of the National Bureau of Economic Research, right? They published a paper in 26, and it's called the focus effect, right? One driver, one task. And if I can remove that, the entire wage bill goes away. If I remove 2 tasks out of 8, that employee is still there. So
now, and actually, you're right. And that employee is not just there; they're actually more productive. This is the surprising thing that I learned from reading your material. If AI automates, let's say I have 8 tasks and AI automates 4 of them, I'm not unemployed. I'm not suddenly out of a job because now I can focus on those other 4 tasks and I'll probably do them better. I'll probably do them more. I might get faster results. In other words, I'm more effective with the AI. This is what we always hear about from the people who are big proponents of AI in the workforce. They're like, AI is not going to take your job. It's somebody who's equipped with AI. A human equipped with AI is going to take your job. That's a glib statement. I think it's a little bit facile, but the point remains, like, if I do 8 things, if I have a very high dimensionality job, I can automate some of it and I'm not out of a job. Your point is if you have a low dimensionality job, then you're highly likely to be automated. That's a different cut on it. And I've seen those reports all the way back to the one from Oxford University that said 40% of jobs are at risk of automation. And what they meant was that there were parts of the job, dimensions of the job that could be automated. They didn't say those people are going to be unemployed, but the way the press reported it was 40% of the people are going to lose their jobs. And that you can trace all this like hysteria around AI straight back to that report, which is like 8 or 9 years ago. It's a long time ago. It was before the pandemic. And it still kind of lingers, like the odor of that misinterpreted report still lingers in the air like a bad smell, and we can't seem to get rid of it. I just don't see it happening that quickly, and I don't see it happening that broadly. I think it is going to automate a lot of the work that we do, a lot of cognitive work that we do, but it's not going to happen all at once, and it's not going to happen in every sector simultaneously. I think that's unlikely. I mean, that said, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to hear about it. You have a great 4-question framework for managers to use to evaluate whether or not jobs can be automated. You call it a screen for management tools.
Yeah. I tried to put this together to make it easy. It quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's a duck. You don't need and don't hire a consultant for the love of God, right? Because you know that job better than anybody that's walking in the door, right? This should take about 20 minutes per role, in my opinion, if you really spend the time to do it, right? Question one is what dimensionality, right? How few essential tasks make up this role, right? And then you score it. They can read the paper, and we don't have to go into detail. Question two is demand elasticity. If this role output got, 30% cheaper to deliver, do customers want more of it, the same, or less? Right? And then you score it. Question three, the return on full automation. How clear and how large is the ROI for automating that role completely? Like imagine, no truck driver. You get their full wage, right? And that truck is always on time. Question four, competitive pressures. How fast is the move being forced? Are your competitors already automating at scale? And how do you compete on that level?
Now, that last question is one that I find instills panic in companies, and it might explain some of the hoopla around, we've got to deploy AI across the enterprise immediately because there's a fear. People are looking over their shoulder, not quite sure what their competitors are doing, but they're imagining a scenario where some rival company is going with full automation, therefore we have to get there sooner. I think that explains a little bit of the panic, at least in the management level, about the deployment of AI. But if you do that without doing the first three questions, then you're almost certain to make a mistake in your deployment. And that would explain why so many of the early AI pilots have not succeeded, and they haven't actually been converted into full deployment. So the first job is to say, okay, what's the dimensionality to each task in the company? To me, this is an HR task, right? It's like, look at each person's work, what they actually do every day, all day long. How many tasks are there? And then how likely can those be automated? And the second one then is, what happens if that's automated, right? What's freed up, I guess? What resource might be freed up? That's the elasticity part. And the third one is, what's the ROI? If this thing, and some of my friends say that the cost of cognitive work is trending asymptotically towards zero. So the cost of cognitive work is going to be basically free and on demand in the future. I think that's an exaggeration, but fine. Directionally, I'll go with it for now. The point there is that if you had free intelligence or directionally free intelligence, if you can plot out a little bit in the future where the cost is continuing to go down, how will that change your business? What's the ROI there? And you could unlock great value, even if it's not evident today, or even if it's not entirely feasible today. That's like a longer term roadmap play for reorganizing the company. Harry, what we're describing here is retooling every company from the workforce out.
100%.
But most companies aren't approaching it that way. They're taking it like an add-on to an existing process.
Yes. So you give it to IT so the project dies, right? I mean, the CEO needs to step up and be responsible for this. I mean, there's just this is not an SAP implementation or an Oracle implementation. You're essentially implementing a form of intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. And let me give you an example of the upside of this, right? So the 100 biggest law firms in America, right? When they implemented their AI systems for looking at cases and so forth, revenues up 13 points in 2024. Lawyer headcount up 7%, right? So it's actually, if you implement it properly, it can actually grow your business, right? Mm-hmm. Radiologists are another one, right? Remember, radiologists were supposed to disappear off the face of the earth. They were supposed to be gone years ago, right?
Yep.
And last year, average pay was up 9% year over year.
And the number of radiologists is up, right? That disruption never occurred. It was broadly forecasted by AI researchers, and it never really happened. Now, that said, We'd be careful here because I just a note of caution, because now somebody listening might say, well, then I guess we don't have to really be concerned. I think there will be job displacement. I think it is going to happen. I think certain tasks are ripe for automation. That's going to cause at least the pain of retooling what you do. Like employees have to learn a new skill, but it might also cause some people to lose their jobs. Let's not undersell that. That's important. I just don't think it's on the scale of the job apocalypse, so like half the people losing their jobs next week. That's an exaggeration. But we've heard this story before. The example is the bank teller, right? And so, would the ATM machine replace the bank teller? And, famously, the anecdote goes, no. In fact, 10 years after the introduction of the ATM machine, there were more bank tellers than ever, and it got so cheap to open branches that they opened more branches than ever. So it didn't do anything to affect the number of people who were working in the banking industry. That said, the smartphone made it possible to skip going to the branch altogether, and it made that entire business irrelevant, right? So that's a famous anecdote. It was made more famous recently by I think it was a Google researcher, or maybe it was an Anthropic researcher who wrote a bit about that and the effect on jobs. So what happens is if you can replace the entire process with automation, and you no longer have a reason to go to a bank branch, then the bank branch has no reason to exist. I think that's true. My partner in this podcast is Brett King, is probably the foremost expert on the future of banking, and I know he's been saying this for far more than a decade, and he's right about it. He says branch today, gone tomorrow. That's the banking industry, but this applies broadly. I've been working in motion pictures for most of my career, and the last 5 years I've been very focused on AI for motion pictures. In the motion picture industry is interesting in the sense that where other industries have a assembly line, that assembly line is almost completely automated by 2020. Where in the motion picture business, the assembly line, the movie studio where there's a crew and a cast and so on, it's still a lot of people. It hasn't changed in 100 years. It's ripe for automation. Now, people are freaking out in Los Angeles right now because it's starting to happen, right? Now, the question of the AI implementation for the motion picture companies is, how do you use AI? Do you deploy it as an assistant, as a way to sort of save some cost on special effects, as a way to kind of manage scheduling a little bit better? These are incremental improvements, akin to like moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic, if you want to be dramatic about it. The much more profound change is if you can replace the entire thing with AI. From my desktop, a single person can create a film. They don't need a cast, a crew, a soundstage, a camera. All of that gets replaced. That's the bank branch in this example. And I think we could go sector by sector through the economy and say, okay, there are these big existing facilities or places or offices or locations that no longer have a reason to exist, because in the fullness of AI deployment, you simply won't need that thing anymore. You won't need to go to that store. We tend to forget that there already has been a job apocalypse in the United States that's been ongoing since 2015, and that's in the retail sector, where more than 100 national chains have gone out of business, and they just disappear. They silently vanish one day. They're here today. Blockbuster Video, it's here today, it's gone tomorrow. Borders Books, here today, gone tomorrow. They disappear, and then we kind of forget because we live in a stage of instant amnesia, and we're saturated with media. I suspect that's going to roll into job functions and chunks of organizations. And this is part probably won't be seen by the public so much, but inside the company is going to create great turmoil when entire departments are no longer necessary. Do you see it that way? And can you talk a little bit about what the future scenario there might look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. What my biggest concern right now is people making decisions on not a full deck of cards, or all the information that they need, or the right information, let's put it that way. And if you get there, like, you're seeing people lay people off because they think AI can do some fancy thing. The other thing that's happening is people are doing these assessments saying, this workforce that we've got isn't really tooled up to do what we need to do next. Instead of retraining everybody, I'll rip off the Band-Aid and I'll hire from scratch, and my hiring will be more specific.
This is Oracle. Oracle firing 30,000 people in a single day with an email.
And there's more of that coming. I think that's copying out. It's Wall Street. It's trying to make my numbers look good. It's not being thoughtful about how to do this. And
I agree. I think they're going to come to regret that because that's going to create tremendous internal turmoil.
100%. And they're not thinking about growth. They're thinking about, how do I look better over the next few quarters?
Cost cutting.
And some of it could be they just made some bad decisions, and this is a way to sort of cover it up, right? But look, I see three futures, right? One is empowerment, right? Personal operating layers become infrastructure like electricity. There's laws on the books that say you own your memory, you can export it, you can port it, you can delete it. There's a trust architecture is standard. And the technology disappears into the background and this human stays in the front. That's one. Number two, exploitation, right? The system feels invisible, but the incentives have shifted, right? So in other words, something like your assistant recommends, Dr. Martinez, because the platform takes a referral fee, not Dr., let's say, Agarwal, right? Who would have been your first choice, but you never saw the weighting, right? And that's not science fiction because social media does that today.
All the time. All the time. And Amazon, frankly, the shopping and the recommendations on Amazon have nothing to do with whether the product's good or a good fit for you or what you need. It's whatever Amazon's being paid to push.
And then three is the fracture, right? Which is these capabilities concentrate in 3 or 4 players. The rest of the economy cannot easily access them, right? The gap compounds. And it's a very, very different world, right? So when I first started writing this
a little bit, sorry, the last idea, because a moment ago I mentioned that there's 2 big AI labs that now command 85% of the revenue for enterprise AI, right? Is that what you're talking about in that last scenario, the fracture, where those continue to grow and grow and grow, and they absorb all of this functionality and thereby command all the income related to it?
I would say that they are the best position to grab that mantle.
So that would be the justification for the outsized valuation that those companies currently have.
100%. And if you think about somebody going public for $1 trillion or more than $1 trillion, like you have to see the revenue curve. Otherwise, why would you give them that valuation?
And they're getting the revenue. I mean, Anthropic is setting the pace, right? This is a company that came from behind and is overtaken, and with a lot of adversity too.
I mean, that number that he said last time when he was being, they gave their update, I was like, oh my God, that's insane growth.
Yeah, it's going from millions to billions in years, right? In a couple of years, and now it's tens of billions. Okay, quick questions for you about the book, Invisible Interface, Chapter 4. You talk about 4 trust signals that are going to determine whether or not I'm ready to delegate. What are the 4 trust signals?
So when I think about trust signals, it's those 4 things that you really need to see so that when someone looks at what the AI system gives them, they can sort of move forward, right? So trust isn't a feeling. I think about it as it's a design choice, right? 4 signals that make delegation possible, right? So show sources, express confidence. Like the system should tell you what its confidence level is. And if it's not confident, go check someplace else or go check yourself.
Right. It'd be helpful if it said, I don't know, once in a while.
Correct.
You
right?
wish.
Well, it could, again, it could be.
It does know, and you're not sure, and then you have to deconstruct the answer to understand it.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, like I said, a confidence measurement. It doesn't have to say I'm wrong, but I'm not 100% sure, right? Mm-hmm. Then allow the override without penalty. And then if we're talking about agents, right, you've got to have an emergency stop button. I should be able to whatever process is going on, I should be able to stop it.
Stop
right?
generating. I agree. I would love to have a break on the thing. Okay, Chapter 5, you talk about proof seconds, and I don't know what this concept is. So unpack proof seconds for me, please.
So when you think about proof seconds is the time elapsed from a user getting an AI answer to the moment they can act on it. Right. So you don't want these systems that we're putting into place to add time, right? You want them to make your life easier and reduce time. It's a latency of trust, essentially. And it's a very simple metric, right? It's like a stopwatch. And you want that number to go down. And that really is sort of, how do you design the system to give the trust signals to a human so that they can move to the next stage? What you also want to watch out for, however, is you don't want that number going to zero, because now that means the human has completely abdicated to the machine. And that can actually introduce liability. And a few of the companies that I've talked to have actually come back and said, we saw that happening, and what we went back and we told all the employees, we will be inserting the wrong answer every once in a while. And so you got to be on your toes and catch them, as opposed to just blindly saying yes every time the system gives you an answer.
Okay, so now the big one. In chapter 6 of The Invisible Interface, you talk about the memory war. And you argue that whoever owns the context is going to control that POL layer and make it valuable. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that personal operating layer, and particularly how memory plays into that. Why is memory so important?
Well, Rob, why are our memories so precious and important to us, right? It's not just the memory. It's just not. It's not the raw data, but what we connect, right? When we go to sleep, we dream or whatever, and we consolidate memory to the things that we believe are important. Sure. And
it's also true at work. That multitasker is the one who's got, the glue is their memory as they're moving from task to task. The software's stupid. It has no idea what the context is or what you're doing next. It's not aware of that. Even if you think about your computer right now, your computer, the applications have no idea what you're doing with the other applications. They're not aware in that respect. So that's part of what you mean by memory, is that these systems are going to be aware enough and smart enough to start to understand what you're building and then gradually extract a context from that it'll retain. Is that what you're describing?
Context is going to be critical, which is why everybody's trying to create the glasses and everything to give more context of what's happening. But, there's 3 concepts in that chapter, right? One is memory sovereignty, right? The practical ability to control, access, export, and delete the content, right? That a person or company, for that matter, should have, right? Cognitive rent, which is that ongoing cost of memory living outside of your control, right? And then things that I call like the receipt graph, right? This living record of what got done that becomes the negotiation power for whoever holds it. Because if I know everything you do and all the decisions you make, Rob, I can sell you swampland in Florida, no problem, because I'm going to know exactly how to frame it to sort of float it by you, because the system understands the underlying drivers of what you're making decisions on.
Okay, let me see if I can play that back. So we're talking about using AI as a prosthesis for thinking. It's like an external memory that we're relying on, and we're telling it everything. We're kind of exposing our thought process to it, and it's capturing all that. And in the future, perhaps it'll be able to retain most of that. Right now, it doesn't always do that, but in the future, you'll have this kind of persistent memory. So it's going to start to understand our thought process probably better than we understand our own. Because what I've observed is that people who are learning to use AI, they have a very difficult time observing their own workflow, and they can't break it down. They can't analyze it. And that's one of the first steps you have to do to mastering the use of AI, is you have to really understand, like, how would I do this, and then explain it to another person, just like you're delegating it to an assistant. Unlike a human assistant, though, the AI retains that, understands it, can improve upon it, and then eventually will have the agency to deal with it. Now, this raises interesting questions, right? You're saying that that information could be used against me. So if it's like an external company that I'm paying money to and it understands my thought process, it can begin to manipulate me. That's one idea. The second one that crosses my mind is, if I'm an employer, I really want to own that memory, right? As an employer, because that's an asset, right? This is my employee who I'm paying, describing exactly what their workflow is. Well, I need to capture that, right? And third, that means that employee could be making themselves obsolete, in the sense that once the company has my memory and my work context and my workflow, what the hell does it need me for anymore? It could replace me in an instant with somebody else and equip them with that tool. Thoughts?
So what you're saying is I'm starting to see employment contracts where the employees and the employment law firms are starting to slip in there of what can be taken. Like when I can take my brain with me, I don't
You can
leave
take
my
your
brain
brain,
there.
but the record of all you've done is going to be controlled by the company. And look, we already signed employee invention agreements, right? So that's a normal business practice, at least with any technology or intellectual property company.
Yeah, I'm not the employment law expert, right? So that's somebody you should talk to. But there's a line there, right? There is a line of me, my insights, my
No,
what
look,
I
I'm with
bring to
you.
the table.
I'm not trying to be the evil villain here. I'm just putting myself in that person's shoes. It's very tempting. Yes, of course, there seems to be some moral right for people to retain their own memories, but we are describing in minute detail what we're doing, and it's being captured and recorded by something that's way smarter than us, and eventually will have better memory than us, although it doesn't currently. All right, well, Harry,
It's
it's been
worse.
a great pleasure chatting with you on the show. I think I need to wrap it up at this point. Do you have any final parting thoughts for our audience about how you see this playing out?
No, I mean, I do think that the future can be bright. I mean, the reason I wrote the book was if people understand something and then policy comes forward, they can put policy into context, right? And hopefully management can make better decisions. But I'm trying to look at the bright side of it with taking the downside into consideration and doing what I can to help try to mitigate the downside.
Right on. Well, folks, the book is Invisible Interface, and the author is Harry Glorikian. And the book will be coming out in about a month. So if you can pre-order now, I'd recommend it. It's an enormous benefit for authors if they get pre-orders. It really, really, really helps. So if you feel inclined to learn more about this, what I can tell you personally, I've read a sample of the book and I've read a number of Harry's blog posts. And for me personally, his thought process has helped me understand what I'm thinking. As you can see, I've come equipped with a lot of my own thoughts here. All of that is in response to what Harry has written. Harry, where can people find you on the web? Where can they learn more about Harry Glorikian?
My website has everything I've ever written. It is www.glorikian.com.
Okay, so your last name.
Yep.
Great. I recommend it. And there's a lot more there, too. There's much of value at Harry Glorikian's website. I hope that you'll go check that out. Once again, Harry, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for joining me. And folks who are listening, we'll be back next week with another person who is thinking about and shaping the future in their own ways. And until then, we will see you in the future.